As a parent, as a grandparent, I can't imagine my child can't drive. They're not old enough to drive a car, but they could go get an abortion without me knowing.
Very important point.
That is.
Puts it in perspective.
It does put it in perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have Amendment 4 on the November 5th ballot in Florida. Voters will consider whether to support Amendment 4 or to reject Amendment 4. And in Florida, we have to have 60% of voters vote in favor of an amendment for it to pass and then go into the state constitution. And so Amendment 4 is very concerning. It's not what it seems. There's a lot of conversation out there about it right now. And there's a lot of people who need to be informed more about what it does. And so it's really important for us to talk about. And what are you hearing out there? What has been your feedback that you've received from individuals that you may have interacted with about Amendment 4, and why do people need to know more about it?
Yeah, I think that the unintended consequences are going to be catastrophic. It's pretty, plain. It's short, but there's so much vagueness. There's a lot of room for interpretation. And so I don't think people realize that if a law passes, if this passes, then any laws that are surrounding abortion would just be completely wiped out, and then they wouldn't be able to create any more laws to regulate abortion. So women's health would be really negatively impacted, because if a woman does then go to seek an abortion, then there'd be no regulations making sure that she's kept safe in that procedure. There'd be no regulations making sure that a doctor would actually be performing that procedure. So, really, I think many pro-life people are educating themselves on this issue, but I wonder if pro-choicers really understand the significance of what this would impact our state, because I think it would really hurt women if this was passed.
So that's an important point on that last thing you said, especially about the state's ability to regulate the centers, because even if the procedure is legal and passed, if Amendment 4 were to pass, then the state can't come in and make sure that the facilities are clean, that the procedure is only being performed by the licensed healthcare provider that should do it. Who's to know what's going on in there? I think you're making a very good point on that.
Right, and so it's an undefined healthcare provider as well. So,
right.
In a lot of, and pretty much all amendments, everything's defined,
right.
And so this healthcare provider is undefined. So really, it could be any healthcare provider could approve this abortion, and so that would allow abortions not just up to viability, but up to birth, with medical exception by undefined healthcare provider.
Right.
And so this would make Florida allowing abortions all the way up until birth. It would make us similar to New York and California. The law would make it where so many people would be coming from out of state to Florida for seeking an abortion.
Right.
So First Coast Women's Services, we have a call center. And so we have it facilitated by registered nurses. And so when the 15-week law was in effect, 36% of our callers were out-of-state callers. So people were flying from out of state, getting abortions in Florida.
That's a huge number.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
36% of callers were out of state. So if this happens, then that's going to make Florida an abortion destination even more so. And so because there's so many restrictions in the southern states, people are going to be coming as a tourist destination.
Right.
For abortions, and I don't think that's what we want.
No, we want to be a destination state for other things, for our beautiful beaches and our great quality of life, not to be a destination for abortion. Yeah. And I think you make the very important point too. This is an educational effort, but it's really for those on both sides of the issue, like we've been talking about. So that's very important. So, Dana, what are you hearing? What do you see out there and here?
People don't understand viability, that portion of the amendment. They don't realize that it could go up to birth, that at the last minute an abortion could be formed here in the state of Florida if this passes. That's another portion of that amendment that is so vague, I feel. And that's what people, I didn't realize that somebody could have it up until birth. Oh, I don't want that.
Right.
You know, and that's going for your people that are pro-choice. I don't think they're even educated in this too. So.
Right, because viability is not defined under
Right.
Florida law,
That's
so
right.
that could to somebody that could mean 6 weeks, to somebody
right.
else 20, to somebody else right up to the moment of birth.
That's right.
And also basically to the whole of it is any individual of any age could have the procedure for any reason. And then there's also the piece about parental notification, maybe for minors after the fact or at some point, but it doesn't say parental consent like we have under current law.
Right.
So really it's wide open, like we're saying. So there's one other part of the conversation that's relevant, and everyone has seen this, that Roe versus Wade was overturned. And so in Florida, last year in the 2023 session, whenever we voted on our life bill, as I call it, we usually have one each year to protect life and strengthen it in Florida, strengthen defense of life in Florida. There were a lot of individuals who thought, well, Roe versus Wade's been overturned, now what happens? And essentially it pushed it back to all of the states to make a decision. And so when we passed the bill last year that said 6 weeks would be the limit, and then there would still be some exceptions up to 15 weeks, that law could not take effect until we saw how the Florida Supreme Court would react, and that was after Roe v. Wade was overturned and all of that. So bringing that to where we are today and the impact here, there could be individuals who think, well, Roe versus Wade is now no more. So, now there must be all these protections, and our, Florida legislature and our governor have worked hard to try to protect life. So it's probably good to go, and not understand that Amendment 4 will completely wipe out all of those laws that we have put on the books in Florida, which now are law for Florida in light of Roe v. Wade being overturned and everything being pushed back to the states, which is a good thing for this when we're defending life. But it is important for people to know that Amendment 4, if passed, would undo all of those protections.
That's right.
That's absolutely right. And one thing that people need to understand, the gravity of it, is that there's been other states who have had similar amendments that have come before their state, and every single one of them thus far have been passed. And so the pro-life, those people who are pro-life really do need to take this with some gravity, because all of those other states, though, it was a 50% plus one that would make those amendments go into effect. This is, with Florida, it's 60% plus one. So, but polling is showing that that it's unclear which way it's going to go right now. But I think that it's really important to really vote your conscience, to be really mindful, because this would. Although Roe v. Wade is undone, this would basically enshrine this into Florida state constitution.
Right. It would undo all of our defense of life policies that we put in for so many years that are the law of the land now, in light of Florida's law standing and Roe v. Wade being overturned. But yes, that's important. It would undo all of that.
Right. Yeah. And so the other states that it's been passed, those very loose parameters for abortion, and so we really do need to be shrewd in this.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Yep. So something that's very important is how can we effectively communicate the potential impacts of Amendment 4 to others in our community. And so the reason that I hold the position I do is I know that fundamentally God is the author of life. He's the sustainer of life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And so we know from Scripture, we're informed, and we know in our hearts that each of us is fearfully and wonderfully made by God in His image. And He fashioned us, and God also made it very clear. Jesus said, whoever offends one of these little ones, it's better for him to be cast into the sea with a millstone around his neck than to offend one of these little ones. So, and also to make the point, too, because in Florida, we do want to support and serve those who have been impacted by abortion, or maybe by having the procedure. Jesus said to a woman who had done something, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. And He was gracious, He was merciful, but made the point, there's an action step here, go and sin no more, but there was not condemnation in that. And so I bring that up to say that, as a state, we are not looking backwards and saying with the finger pointed that there's no hope for you, there's no help for you. But as we move forward, Florida is a state that values life. We will fight hard to defend life, and this is right. This is a battle of good and evil. This is right and wrong.
Yeah.
And so with the work you're doing, with the work that our support services program in Florida is doing, we want to make sure that people know that parenting services, counseling, the education materials, information about parenting and adoption, and even employment readiness, that's all a part of what we're trying to offer in Florida. And I know you're doing that too, to make sure that individuals know. So we're in no way trying to kick anyone to the curb or point the finger of shame or anything of that nature.
Yeah, one of my favorite scriptures is in Genesis with the story of Hagar, and she is pregnant and she runs away, out of fear, and God reveals Himself to her as the God who sees, and He sees her and He speaks into
That's
her,
right.
and so that's who I see us as is God uses us to be the one who sees her and sees her in her need, and when she's desperate, when she's vulnerable, when she feels alone and isolated, and is able to speak life into her where she doesn't. It's not the end of the road for her.
Right.
And we saw that in Hagar's life, and
Right.
she was completely crushed by the pregnancy. But what I think is beautiful about what we do is many of our women feel that these pregnancies are at the end of the road for them. It's life's over, and then through choosing life, they're able to see, no, this is maybe the best thing that ever happened to me to be a parent, and so they're able to see the beauty of that child, and so to be able to see her and to speak life into her and to support her is one of my favorite things.
And there's some great stories that have come from that too,
Yes.
when they talk about it afterwards. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's great. That's great. Well, and like we're talking about too, just over the past 3 to 4 years in Florida, we have seen a pretty significant increase in the number of procedures that have been performed. 2020, it was around 74,000, 75,000, and now it's up north of 84,000. And we know that most of those procedures, over 94%, are elective. It's not due to rape or incest or the risk of the mother's life. It's an elective procedure. So again, thankfully, with the work that you're doing and with the educational efforts that we're trying to do, there are other ways. There are other options, and we're really trying to help let everyone know that. And as far as Amendment 4 itself, I unashamedly say it's too extreme for Florida. There's some good groups out there that are working to educate the voters. We have a couple of websites too where we've found some information that's very good that I know is being disseminated out there, to the community and through churches and through organizations and just person to person. And it really just spells it out very clearly. Current law requires that we have 1 or 2 physicians to be involved. But if Amendment 4 passes, there's no protection for the baby, and it would allow the abortion procedure right up to the moment of birth, which is just atrocious. And then also there's no definition for the key terms in the amendment, like healthcare provider, viability, patient's health, and government interference. And then also, while the amendment allows for parental notification, I can see right through that and say that notification is different than consent. And so right now you have to have parental consent if it is a minor in Florida who is pursuing an abortion. And again, that's for that young woman's health, for her safety, because she may not know the family medical history, but her mom or dad may know the history and may realize that can be a risky or dangerous or life-threatening procedure for her. And it would be the only surgery in Florida where a parent would not have to give consent prior to it happening. And so that sets it apart, not in a good way. So that's very important, very extreme.
That's extreme.
And then also it would enshrine, like we talked about, it would enshrine an absolute right to abortion up to birth in Florida state constitution. And then there's no defined time limit, which again means it could be, at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 15, 24, or it could be right up to the moment of birth. And we know that there are interests out there that would love to profit off of the parts of the baby. As awful as that sounds, it's the truth. And so we shouldn't sugarcoat it. There are groups out there that are pushing very hard to pass this amendment because they want to profit off of the sale of aborted babies.
Right.
And that's wrong.
And I think we need to really hone in on the fact that this would enshrine that in the Florida Constitution as a permanent thing. So there would be no changing it. So abortion...
It's not just a statute, it's the Constitution.
It is the Constitution.
So it stays in there unless the voters change it in the future.
Which would be so difficult. And if you really think in real terms about viability, most people would say viability, but again, it's undefined in this amendment, but most people would say viability is about 24 weeks. So the size of that baby is, from my my elbow right here up to my wrist.
Right.
That's about the size of a viable baby.
Right.
So to think that in Florida forever it would be allowed with no approval, just
Right.
period,
Right.
to abort a
For any
baby of that
reason.
size,
Yep.
who can feel pain. We know that can feel pain. We know that could survive probably. But yes, we could just abort that child because they're not viable.
Right.
Which would be they would have every loophole in the world to explain away why that baby was unviable.
Right.
And then with a healthcare provider, and that's not defined, could then allow it up to birth.
Right.
So
Any healthcare provider. It doesn't have to be a physician. It doesn't have to be an OBGYN. It doesn't have to be anyone who normally would either do a delivery or even currently today performing an abortion. It could be any healthcare provider.
well, and a healthcare provider could be someone who's working at the abortion clinic.
Right.
Could be considered a healthcare provider.
Right.
So you go
Right.
to the abortion clinic, and healthcare provider says, "Oh, you do need this.
Right.
You do need this procedure."
Could administer drugs, or they could actually begin to perform the procedure. Right.
Right,
And how
so-
would anyone know?
Right.
Right.
There's too many loopholes.
Right.
And so it has to make you wonder what's really behind
Right.
this. Who's really behind this? Who's pushing this agenda
Right.
to make Florida the abortion destination?
Yeah.
One other thing, going back to the notification of a parent, as a parent, as a grandparent, I can't imagine my child can't drive. They're not old enough to drive a car, but they could go get an abortion without me knowing.
Very important point.
That is,
Puts it in perspective.
it does put it in perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing I'd like to say too is, our current law on abortion, does have limitations. So it doesn't limit abortion whenever someone has been raped or there's human trafficking
That's right.
or fetal abnormalities. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about those things, because some of the pro-choice groups were kind of say that the current law is too extreme,
Right.
but really there's already some exceptions there,
Right.
That's already enshrined in Florida law.
Right.
And so I think it's really important to get clarity,
Right.
because women are still, who have ectopic pregnancies, are still allowed to get medical care, and that's not an abortion.
Right.
I had an ectopic pregnancy myself, and it is not an abortion. But I think that sometimes with all this debate, people try to cloud the issue, and so I think it's very important to really to make educated decision, to really do the research, to do your due diligence, and make sure that you really understand this law, because this amendment could not just impact your life as a voter, but it's going to impact your children, your
Yep.
grandchildren.
Yep.
And so as someone who's making this decision right now, it's really important that we communicate this to our friends and to our churches, the people that we're in community with, because it is an important issue, and I would really hate for this issue to negatively impact my children and my grandchildren in the future generations.
Yeah. Very important.
This
Yes.
amendment not only ends the baby's life, but it potentially could end the mother's life too.
Yes.
These extreme laws.
That's
put
very
into
important,
play.
Dana. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's not just about that procedure, because it could put, and we know today there are women who go in and something could happen. The doctor or staff could say it was unexpected, but something could happen, and then the mother not make it through that procedure. So it's really that, you talk about a risk to the life of the mother, that's one
that's
right
it.
there,
That's
especially if we don't have the regulation over the healthcare facility to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. What about the instruments? Are the instruments clean? Are the systems working okay? Do you have emergency services on call or available right there if something unexpected happens?
Right.
That's real.
And then
Is
there
the
would be-
doctor accredited?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we don't know that.
Right. A
Right, and they
healthcare
don't even have
provider
to be a doctor.
Right. A healthcare provider doesn't have to be a licensed physician under this.
Well, another thing
So-
too is the fact that Jacksonville has 3 abortion clinics right now. There's some states that have 0 abortion clinics.
Right.
Some states that have 1, and our city has 3.
Right.
So there's other states that the abortion laws became more loose, and they had that abortion clinics are popping up left and right.
Right.
So then what would be to prevent that happening? Just little mom and pop abortion clinics popping up,
Right.
or or more funding to be funneled into Florida to promote abortions.
Right.
And that's going to impact the culture. That's going to impact our state. And so there's no ability for us to foresee the financial impact
Right.
to our state for negatively
Right.
as a result of this being put into place.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's very important. So the ballot summary, the Amendment 4 question that is before voters on November 5th in Florida, it says no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. I mean, when individuals look at this, they'll see that it's very short. It's one of the shortest I know I've ever seen in the many years that I've been involved in the process. And just quickly on that, some key words that stand out. The first sentence there: no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability. Just that first part, no law. That means it repeals all the common sense laws that have been enacted by our duly elected state representatives and state leaders that have worked on this and that have put that in based on them being elected, based on their values. The people have chosen them to be there and to make laws. It would undo all of that. It repeals it. It would happen immediately if the Amendment 4 passes. And then viability, like we've talked about, it's undefined, so that could be at any point in pregnancy, which would include painful late-term abortions right up to birth. And then patient's health. That doesn't just mean physical health. That can mean emotional, financial, other types of health, and essentially create no limits on abortion. Because arguably you could say, well, it's a financial issue. It's emotional. I just can't get there emotionally. Or it could be a physical issue. So it opens that door wide open, makes it very loose. And then healthcare provider, like we talked about, there's no definition. So we have, I think, over 45 to 50 different types of categories. Not just licensed physicians in Florida are considered healthcare providers. So it's very wide open there. And then again, notification. That is not parental consent, and it does not say when the notification has to occur. And even if it did occur before the procedure, that parent's hands are tied and they can't do anything. Even if there's a legitimate concern that relates to the life of their daughter, then if the daughter, if the individual, the young woman wants to continue to do it, that can be very risky for her to do that. And parents who would know best for their children would not be able to give that consent. So it's again, it's too extreme, and these are the facts. These are just facts when you look at it black and white, and it's important for individuals to know. There are a couple of entities that I know are working on it, like we have, and they have some websites set up. 2extreme4fl.org is the 2 Extreme for Florida group. They're working on it, and then we have one called Do No Harm Florida, and their website is donoharmfl.org, and they have all this information that we've talked about on those websites, and they have some videos, I believe, too. So,
and they've been great. We've used them, both websites, a lot to
Yes.
educate ourselves. So there's a plethora of information. So if anybody needs to dive deeper into this,
those are good
great.
resources. Yes,
They are.
absolutely. And so to sum it up, basically, Amendment 4 would lawfully allow abortion for any reason by a female of any age at any stage of pregnancy by a non-doctor, potentially, and with no consent from parents. And that is why Amendment 4 is too extreme for Florida. And so, my encouragement, again, I am very concerned about this and concerned about what it means for the future of Florida and for our people. And we're asking individuals to pray. We're asking them to get informed. And whether individuals, subscribe to a particular faith or they attend church or they don't, they need to know what this amendment says, and they need to be educated. I continue to interact with individuals out there who have heard about it or come across it, or when I'm talking with them about it, they just don't know the full breadth. They don't know the broadness, how extreme it is. And so it's very important that we let them know. And then the vote is November the 5th. So we're asking everyone to share the information and distribute it to as many people as they can. So.
And no one likes government interference, but it's necessary to regulate the practices of medicine to protect patients. And so we really do need the government to regulate and make sure that when medicine is practiced, that it's practiced effectively and that there's no malpractice. And so that's another thing to really consider is the fact that
a balance. Yes, you're talking about a balance, Jennifer.
Right.
A balance is needed because we don't want to go in and say, every last detail about what a healthcare provider should do, or any person in any industry really, whether it's a different one. But in this one, yes, it's for protection of patients. It's also for protection of the healthcare providers too, because of some of the things we've talked about. So I think you're making a very good point. There's a balance that's needed when the state is involved. As far as, helping to shape the future in Florida so that we can support and serve women and families in need who are trying to make a decision on this, whether to have an abortion, or those who maybe already have, how do we work through that, and how do we proceed as we move into the future? What's your perspective on that?
Women are always going to be in need. We're always going to need pregnancy resources here in the state of Florida. There's always going to be people that are facing pregnancies, and we're always here to help. I think a lot of times you're, from the pro-choice side of it, people think we're just a checkoff list. They chose life, let's go on, but it's not like that for your Pregnancy Resources Center here in the state of Florida. We're there if a woman and a guy chooses to carry you through the whole 9 months of your pregnancy, to educate you in what it means to be a parent, to encourage you, to support you. And you know what? We're there to support them if abortion is the decision they make. We're not judgmental. We love them and care about them and show compassion to all of them. We have seen tremendous growth in our clients and growth in them as a family unit, from the father of the baby and the mother coming, meeting with counselors, educating on what it means to be a parent. How do I take care of my child? How do I take care of the mother of this child? I need to support her, no matter if we get married or not.
Right.
We have seen the family unit become a family because of this. We have seen clients get involved in churches. They're encouraged to go. We, in no way do we push them or anything like that,
Right.
but they see a difference in us when they come into our centers and they want what we have. And, we've got one now that she made an adoption plan. She was considering abortion and made an adoption plan last year, started coming to church, has joined that church, and is actively involved in a small group.
That's great.
And so that's a changed life, and not only for that mom, but she's a mother of 4 other children.
Wow.
She's changed.
Wow.
And
That's great.
And that's because of your pregnancy resource centers in Florida. I think we get sometimes like I said, a bad rap. We're just there to. Hopefully they choose life. Yes,
Right.
we hope that, but we want to walk beside them and carry them. Me and Jen were sharing earlier that I was reading that most women say if they had emotional or financial support, they would have never chosen abortion.
Wow.
And that is where we step in. The emotional and financial support we can give women. We have a benevolence fund now. We use them for women.
Okay.
We had a young mother that had a child, and she was pregnant, living in a tent. And we helped provide housing for her. So it's a broad range of resources that we are connected with in our community to help these women.
Right. What great success stories you're talking about too. And then it helping to move them on to other good decisions to help them and their family, getting into church, interacting more with other people, and most of all, valuing that life that the Lord's blessed them with, and all of that. So, and that what you're doing there at First Coast Women's Services is a great complement to what we as a state have continued to try to invest in, and that's something that that I as a policymaker want the voters to know too. We're not just going in and saying, well, we oppose this because we're trying to control what everybody does. We have had set up for almost 20 years in Florida a support services network of centers that may want to participate and are doing work very complementary to what you're doing to help in that regard. So we're not just trying to push individuals out to the curb and say, here's the decision you ought to make and you go take care of yourself, kind of thing. It's the same kind of approach. So we're trying to be compassionate in that. The state's efforts can only go so far, and it should, because the state and government shouldn't be trying to do everything. It can't do that. But we have that as the reality, but we also know that we need to be and must be a state that values life,
Right.
At every stage, from womb to the tomb. And like we were talking about a little bit earlier, the amendment is too extreme, and because of its, I would say, simplicity, even though it's far-reaching, it's very vague. It undoes any laws that we have put on the books prior to now to protect life, which right now we're at 6 weeks, and we know there's some exceptions up to a higher number. But as we discussed too, viability, that could mean a different thing for a different person. And then healthcare provider, we have probably 40 or 50 plus healthcare providers that are listed out in the law and in statute in Florida. And so it could be any of them. And I know some folks have reacted when I've told them, you could be in your podiatrist office or your urologist office or something like that, and it doesn't even have to be a doctor. It could be another healthcare practitioner that says, well, you might want to think about getting this procedure and recommend it, or maybe even seek to try to help provide it. And so it's very broad. It undoes the consent that parents have to give for their minor children, which is very dangerous because a young person may not know their family medical history. It's the only surgery in Florida that would be allowed without parental consent for minors. And that is a very dangerous proposition, to think about. And then not to mention the safety regulations wouldn't be in place at the centers. And that's something that should concern everyone. So small in the amount of wording, but very far-reaching in its impacts. And the legislature and the state leadership would be very constrained to try to do anything, related to safety and all of that. So
it's very alarming as a parent. I have 4 children, and you do everything you can to speak into their life, and you as a parent need to have those. Right. You need to be able to speak into your children's life when they make important decisions. And many parents, will find out that their child's pregnant and not even realize that they had been sexually active. And so to strip away the rights of parents to speak into the lives of their children in important times, I think that this amendment is doing that. And again, I think that pro-choice and pro-life people should understand and recognize that a pro-choice person is saying they should have a choice, but at the same time, a child can't even, choose to take alcohol or some other things because we understand that they are not capable to understand the long-term impacts of their decisions. And so a child doesn't have the capability to understand the long-term impacts of an abortion.
Right.
Most women who are grown don't understand the long-term impacts of an abortion, how it impacts them mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially. We're not animals. We're not just a physical being. So an abortion impacts people on all those levels. And so without the education, without having the ability to have someone speaking wisdom into their lives, is a tragedy for those children, and it will impact them in their future. And I think that really needs to be considered, because the way that it's worded makes you think that that's still going to be intact.
Right.
But that's one of those places where it's tricky, because it makes it sound like parental consent is still there, but no, it's just parent notification.
Which could be after the fact.
Which would, yes, absolutely, it would be after the fact.
Right.
And if they get the right information.
Right. Is it via phone? Is it email? Is it verbal? It could be anything. Can you, Jennifer, you just mentioned a minute ago something important too. I'm sure that you and Dana, you too, have interacted with women or others who may be in families of those who have gone through and had an abortion. And you mentioned, for minors and for young women, it could be the case, but even for adult women, that then would share that they either might not have understood what it could do later, mentally, emotionally, physically. What's some of that feedback you've gotten directly from those who have gone through that, and what wisdom can that impart to those who may not have done it but may be considering it?
Well, one thing that is interesting is there's a law right now that a person can't be coerced or forced to have an abortion. Right. And so if someone takes a person to an abortion clinic, the person feels that they're being coerced, they're not legally allowed to do that. There's a paper that someone can sign saying, I don't want to be forced to have an abortion, and then we can actually send that to a clinic. That's a regulation that's in effect. And so I've talked to several women whenever I used to counsel women in the center, and they would say things like, I had an abortion early in my life, and I felt pressured. And you'll hear many women say that they felt pressured or coerced. And so one thing that concerns me about this law or this amendment, is that there could be no laws to prevent people from coercing people to have an abortion. And so what Dana was saying earlier is so important, that there's a study that said that I think it was 60% of women who were post-abortive said that if just one person had supported them, that they would have chosen life.
Wow.
But on the flip side of that, many of them ended up feeling that they were pressured.
Wow.
And so that they wanted to choose life, but they were in a vulnerable position. And a lot of times that's what's happening. We talk to women who, one of the girls that we just recorded her client story, and it's on our website, she was living in Georgia, was in an abusive relationship. He was trying to pressure her to have an abortion. He would even pay for it. And so she ended up fleeing to Florida to be safe for her child and her future child.
Yeah.
And so she ended up having to flee so that she wasn't coerced. But what law is going to be able to protect those people at this point? This would completely nullify the ability for the state to regulate someone from being coerced, and that's scary.
Right.
So this amendment is so extreme that it really would handcuff our government, our state government from protecting women. And I think that we all love the women in our state, right? We all want to see them safe, healthy.
Well, and the state decision makers have been elected by the people too to make the policy decisions. So this would totally tie the hands, like you're talking about, for additional protections.
Right, and it would make it just set in stone.
Yeah.
Where laws, we see how the law in Florida has been like a pendulum, right? It was, 24 weeks, and it was 6:15. Now it's 6.
Right.
But that's a beauty, right? Because it's allowing the conversation to continue.
Right.
Where this amendment would completely cease the conversation. It would
Right.
say we're not having a conversation anymore. There's no laws that can be put into effect.
Right.
Nothing can be said. This cannot be undone. And I think none of us ever want to feel that. None of us want to feel handcuffed. And so this amendment, in saying we're preventing government interference, is actually very much putting limits on the state that I don't think are healthy, and it stops the conversation. And I think that our government was created to be able to be living.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then the people, the voters, have the opportunity, if they don't like the laws that are being passed, or they don't like the elected officials who are there, then they have the opportunity each 2 years or 4 years to go and make a different decision on that. So that's a very good point to make. So, and thank you for sharing on that too, because I know those stories, they're real. They're out there by those who, again, are either considering going through with an abortion, but particularly those who have had them, and only they can personally understand those feelings, but as they share their stories, that can convey wisdom and helpful information to those who may not have done it. And also, thank you for sharing, on that. So, and it's very important. I mean, this is up in November. It's coming quickly, and there are efforts I know that are underway to let people know the truth about it. And that's really what some of the groups that are out there fighting the amendment are trying to do, is make sure that people know truth, and then it'll go before the voters so that they can make a decision and all. And I will say again, as a state policymaker, I am so appreciative of what First Coast Women's Services does and what both of you do and your team do to try to help and again provide that support and that serving. Tied with everything you said, what you were talking about, Dana, about the financial pressure or the emotional support, that's all combined in there. So it sounds like really, women who may be struggling with this, it's not, well, I want to do the right thing or the wrong thing here, and I don't value the life of my baby that they are carrying. It's there are all these other external factors which are important.
That's right.
that go into that, and so it's understandable that if you feel isolated or alone, or you feel like there's no help or support, it's understandable why that path may seem like the only way, even though we know there's more that they could do, or they don't have to choose that. So that's very important. So any other thoughts, Dana, about what we're talking about and what people need to know? And
from women that have had past abortions, when we talk to them, most all of them say, I wish there had been somebody that could have shared all these options with me, and I wouldn't have done it too. That's another thing. We do share all their options with you. We share what's involved in an abortion, the pros and cons,
Right.
what you're looking at emotionally, the physical risk, what it means being a parent, what adoption looks like. And so many of them said, I would have looked at that option if somebody had presented it at, when I went and had the abortion. So that's what we do see with our girls that come in here too, and guys.
Yeah.
They suffer too. Sometimes they don't know until years later that there was an aborted child that was involved in a relationship. But it's the compassion I think your pregnancy resource centers show their clients, no matter what. One of the things we say to or I have said years to our clients when they come in, we don't care just about that baby, but we care about you.
Yeah, that's so important.
Because when they come in, so many times it's not about the baby, it's about them.
Right.
I want to get out of this. I can't do this right now.
Right.
But you said it right. In our clients' lives, their unplanned pregnancy, which I feel like there's never an unplanned pregnancy, because he's the author of life and he has designed it. But in that pregnancy, that is just a portion of what's going on in their life right now. So let's help with the other pieces.
Yeah.
I don't have a house to live in. Okay, we got 9 months to work on that.
Right.
We got 9 months, and lots of times when you tell your clients, just stop. Let's think about this. Let's, pause for a minute, put that pause button on. Let's just see. So many times, and they realize that I got time to fix this.
Yeah.
I know in a situation one time we had a young couple come in, and the father, baby came in too. They had a child in the stroller. She was pregnant, and she had already had a pregnancy test with us, and she hadn't came back for the ultrasound, and she said she had changed her mind. She wants an abortion. So we sat down with, as a couple and talked to them, and one of our male advocates was in there too while we talked to the father of the baby. And the one thing we asked, if your situation was different, would you carry this baby? And they said, absolutely. Okay, let's work on that. And that's where your pregnancy resource centers help, you know.
Yeah,
and we want to see
important.
We want to see strong families too.
Yeah.
We'll see couples who are together in a what appears to be a healthy relationship. And if I'm sure you have kids, right? And
That's
having
right.
kids are stressful, right? But if you have an unplanned pregnancy, it's even more stress on the relationship.
Yeah.
And so we want to provide supports for those relationships as well, because just because they're having extra fights or something, maybe because of the baby and the stress of it, we want them to understand that it's normal to feel stressed out. It's normal to be scared, right? And to learn communication skills, so that way we can help make that relationship stronger, because regardless of what they decide with this pregnancy, they're going to need to learn how to co-parent, or hopefully we can help to strengthen that relationship. And so we one of the things that we offer is we offer parenting classes, but we also offer relationship skills component, so then that way we can help them and strengthen that relationship, so that relationship can maybe stand the test. And so we have one couple, we're recording their story actually today after we're done with this podcast, but they had come into our center several years ago with an unplanned pregnancy and were considering an abortion, and they ended up choosing life, taking some of those relationship skills classes. Fast forward, they ended up getting married. Now they have a second child. They still have a strong relationship,
Wow.
and they really credit First Coast Women's Services with that support to say, hey, we could make it. And what the challenges we were facing wasn't a normal, but we just needed to learn how to communicate better, to understand each other better. And don't we want in Florida to have strong marriages and strong families?
Yes.
I mean, that's the biblical values that we espouse.
Foundation of society. Yeah.
Yeah. As Christians, as First Coast Women's Services, that's part of our core values, is to be a faith-based organization. And we want to see those families strengthened, and we want to do everything that we can to support them.
Well, and as a supportive note on that, I know that we spend, studies have shown that Florida spends into the billions to try to support individuals, children, others, because of family fragmentation. Be it in the juvenile system and the foster system, all of the various departments of the state that would interact with children and families. Obviously, DCF, the main one. But as you have more broken families, even if you look at it just from an economic standpoint, which is a very real consideration the state has to look at budget-wise, that cost continues to go up. And so it's not just, we know fundamentally that God has established the family, and that, we should have our full and complete families with parents and their children. But as you get away from that, and as there are issues that affect the families, then there is more of a cost to the state and to the taxpayer. So that goes along with what you're saying too. So.
And we support single moms as well.
Yes.
There's we have an Earn While You Learn program, and so every time they come into the center, they get to earn items. There's some of the girls will also do some classes that are offered through churches as well. And so then that way it allows her to have a community, so they're not alone. And so in addition to the Earn While You Learn, there's churches that offer supports called Embrace Grace. And so that's a program where single moms can have a Bible study together, learn parenting skills as well as a Bible study, and then they create community and they don't feel alone. So that way we help to support them as well. So there's different ways that First Coast Women's Services supports families in need. And like Deanna was saying, it's not just, we of course want her to choose life.
Right.
But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're setting her up to succeed as a mother. And we want to set them up as a family to succeed if that's something that's in the realm of possibility. So we want to be that support system that they need, that voice saying, hey, you can do it. You don't have to feel pressured to have an abortion, because most women don't wake up saying, oh, I want to have an abortion.
Right.
They don't desire that. They don't desire to terminate that life, but they feel backed into a corner. And so we want to make sure that we do everything that we can to cheerlead them and to help them know that they can do this, and then to really back it up with action as well.
Yeah. So important. Well, this our conversation is great, and we hope it will help individuals, our voters out there, understand as we get in the lead up here to November, when the question is on the ballot, that they'll look more into it and understand that there's a lot more to it than what it seems. Know the facts, tell others. Obviously, we encourage everyone to pray about this, and that we would continue to defend life in Florida, and that the amendment would not pass. Because of what it does and what it would mean for individuals and for our state. And can't thank both of you enough again for the work you're doing and for your help in that effort, to educate. And that's the main thing that's needed right now, is that people would know what it means and what would happen if it passes. So we're going to continue to be in prayer about that and trust the Lord with the results. And ask everyone to vote November 5th and vote no on Amendment 4.
That's correct. Thank you, Senator.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.